Welcome back to Historical Quarrels. This is part 2 of the British and Ottoman World War I episode, where we're going over the conflicts between the United Kingdom and the Ottoman Empire during the events of World War I. I'm recording this a day later, after the end of my recording session for episode 1, or part 1 of this. And today, we're going to be going over the Sinai and Palestine campaigns. We'll be talking about Lawrence of Arabia and the Opium Sigs. So sit back, get ready for more details, and like I said last time, we're just jumping right into this shit. Let's get to it. Bam! So the Sinai and the Palestine campaign happened in 1915 to 1918. This campaign was conducted by the British Empire against the Ottoman Empire in the Sinai Desert and Palestine. The British successfully pushed the Ottomans northward, culminating in the capture of Jerusalem in December of 1917 and Damascus in October of 1918. So before we get to those two events, though, let's go over a bit of background, understand what was going on in Egypt before the war broke out, and why Egypt became like this very important struggle area for them. So since 1805, Egypt had been a de facto independent state under the Muhammad Ali dynasty, though it remained de jure part of the Ottoman Empire. The United Kingdom's occupation of Egypt from 1882 severely curtailed Egypt's de facto independence, but it did not alter its legal status, with the Egyptian Khedive technically remaining a vassal of the Ottoman Sultan. Very technical here. It's like, I'm technically mostly Norwegian, and, technically I could claim that I'm, Norwegian, but no, I live in America. So that's kind of like the technicality here on that level. Seeking to end the British occupation of the country, Khedive Abbas II sided with the Ottoman Empire upon the latter's entry into the First World War, on the side of the Central Powers. And this really pissed off the UK. And so the UK went ahead and deposed Abbas and terminated the still persisting legal fiction of Ottoman sovereignty over Egypt. And that's how they presented it. They said it was fucking fake, just like how gaslighting's fake, you stupid bitch. Sorry, I love that joke. Gaslighting's not real, you're a stupid bitch. Anyways, and they declared the reestablishment of the Sultanate of Egypt, with Hussein Kemal, who's the uncle of the Khedive, he became Sultan. The Sultanate was to be administered as a British protectorate, with all matters pertinent to the war effort controlled exclusively by the UK, because they were not getting fucked over by some upstart Egyptian sultan again. And mostly because they needed to protect the Suez Canal, which was of vital strategic importance to the British. It reduced sailing time from India, New Zealand, and Australia to Europe. So they made it super quick for them to get where they needed to go and to get troops and get people back over there. As a result, Egypt became a major base during the war, particularly during the Gallipoli campaign, and to Germany and the Ottoman Empire, the canal was the closest and weakest link in British communications. So, and the reason why it was weak, it was just a very massive canal. And so defense of it caused a number of problems, again, with the sheer size of it alone, making it hard to control, and there was no road from Cairo. While only one railway truck crossed the 30 miles of the desert from Cairo to Ismailia on the canal before branching north to Port Said and south to Suez, control of the central area around Ismailia was of great strategic importance because these three canal towns relied on fresh water from the Nile via the Sweetwater Canal to the main gates and sluices near there. So at the beginning, the hostilities between Britain and the Ottoman Empire, again, back in November, and the defense force caused them to evacuate the part of the Sinai Peninsula that was east of the canal, and they began concentrating their defenses on the western side of the canal. The British force comprised the 10th and 11th Indian Divisions, the Imperial Service Cavalry Brigade, the Bikaner Camel Corps. They rode a lot of camels. 3 batteries of Indian mountain artillery, and 1 Egyptian artillery battery. These were supported by the guns of Allied ships in the canal. Lots of canal fighting going on here. Opposing them were around 25,000 men, including the 25th Division. The Ottoman Empire demonstrated its interest in being reinstated in Egypt in 1915 when Ottoman forces attacked British forces in Egypt. Because they were like, how dare you take our vassal state away from us, and how dare you depose sweet baby Abbas II? He was the sweetest of babies, and I wanted him to be in charge of all the other Egyptians. The Germans also helped to foment unrest among the Senussi in what is now Libya, when they attacked western Egypt and threatened the Sudan during the Senussi campaign. So, Egypt essentially, and this is what they contributed. They were neither an independent ally nor a member of the British Empire, and as such, they held a very unique position amongst the belligerents. The recently appointed High Commissioner, Sir Reginald Wingate, and Murray agreed that Egypt's contributions would be restricted to the use of the country's railway. I'm sure they said it in a posh, even more British accent. Like, that wasn't a British accent. Like, hello there. How are you doing today? How can I help you? I'm very cockney. That's the worst accent to do, is the Cockney one. So, however, Maxwell had proclaimed on the 6th of November of 1914 that Egypt would not be required to aid Britain's war effort, which kind of, was kind of dumb, but also, I guess, like the morally correct thing to do. That being said, though, martial law allowed the British administration to control foreign European residents, monitor foreign agents, and in turn, dangerous persons who were the subjects of hostile nations. So really, like, even though that was the morally correct thing to do, they still had a little loophole to get back in there and control shit if they needed. Good old British imperialism, working at its finest. The powers were also used to police prostitution and the sale of alcohol. Fucking assholes. The capitulations, however, provided some protection to the Europeans who controlled both these industries. Because again, the only people that are allowed to make money are the white Europeans that are controlling these other countries. Assholes. All of them. In autumn of 1917, GHQ was transferred from Cairo to the front, leaving garrison battalions. This move took the commander-in-chief of the EEF, who was responsible for martial law, out of touch with the civil authorities, and unrest in Egypt became serious during the winter of 1917 or 18. Again, because of German and Ottoman, essentially spy games. They were playing a bunch of spy games here. And if you played Civilization, you know that when your enemy has just recently taken over a territory, you can pretty much send in a spy and format unrest, and if they're close to you, hopefully they rebel, and then hopefully your culture is strong enough to take over that town. Why am I explaining a video game to you guys right now? Because the game's actually pretty good at, like, demonstrating how a lot of these war tactics and, like, spy and other policies went on. It was not one for one, but again, if you play it, you get a pretty good idea of how a lot of things went down. And if you start, like, implementing some real life strategies in the game, it's kind of cool. You can recreate some battles. Anyways, by 1917, 15,000 Egyptian volunteers were serving in the Egyptian army. Deployed mainly is the Sudan with 3 battalions in the EEF. God, I'm not even tired. I don't know why I yawned there. I hope you don't mind. Sorry about the yawning. Along with the 98,000 laborers, 23,000 of whom were serving overseas, the number of Egyptian enlistments could not be increased as conscription could threaten the production of much-needed food and cotton and the stability of Egypt. So the only reason why that they didn't get, like, more Egyptian slaves essentially to fight for them was because they needed them to go, make food and make sure Egypt stayed stable while they were controlling it. Otherwise, a lot more Egyptians would have fucking died. I guarantee that. Also, by this time, much of the railway lines in Egypt that were not crucial to the production of cotton, sugar, cereals, and forages had already been lifted and used on the military railway, except the Khedivial Railway from Alexandria to Daba, which was available for emergencies only. Only emergencies. You use it for anything else and you get fucking killed. The Egyptian Labor Corps and the Egyptian Camel Transport Corps had performed invaluable service during the Sinai campaign and would perform even greater service and hardships during the coming Palestine campaign. As the war dragged on and the fighting moved beyond the Egyptian border, many Egyptians felt the war no longer concerned them. They're like, well, it's not here anymore. I don't have to deal with it, so I don't care. I don't care about your place. I don't care about your homes. I only care about mine. At the same time, the increasing need for Egyptian personnel turned volunteers into forced labor, although highly paid, quote unquote, in a system controlled by the local mudirs. And the quotes are there because they were not highly paid. It was like pennies essentially to the dollars that they'd make. Anyways, or they wouldn't really make all that much. They'd probably die, and then they didn't have to give the money to their family. There are a whole bunch of other things that went on politically and socially in Egypt, and it was really fucked for native Egyptians. Really sucks. Anyways, from the 26th of January to the 4th of February 1915, the Suez Canal was attacked by a large force of the Ottoman army. Beginning on the 26th and 27th, two smaller flanking columns of the Ottoman army made secondary attacks near Kantara in the northern sector of the canal and near Suez in the south. These were followed by the main attacks on the 3rd and 4th of February on the Suez Canal to the east of the Suez to Kantara Railway. And Kress von Kressenstein's Ottoman Suez Expeditionary Force, man, that is a long-ass fucking name. That'd be KVKOSEF. If they just, I guess that's still like a long acronym too. Fuck you for having long names, you German and Ottoman fucks. Anyways, they advanced from the southern Palestine to arrive on the canal on the 2nd of February, when they succeeded in crossing the canal near Ismailia on the morning of February 3rd, 1915. Only 2 Ottoman companies successfully crossed the canal. The rest of the advance party abandoning attempts to cross as a result of the strong British defense by 30,000 men of the Imperial Service Cavalry Brigade and the Bikaner Camel Corps, supported by Egyptian Army and Indian Mountain Artillery. The British then amassed troops at the scene, which made another crossing impossible. The Ottoman companies held their positions until the evening of February 3rd of 1915, when the commanding officer ordered them to withdraw. The retreat proceeded, and this is a quote, orderly, first into a camp 10 kilometers east of Ismailia. They're very orderly, very prim and posh. Good for them. And subsequently, Ottoman advanced troops and outposts were maintained on the Sinai Peninsula on a line between El Arish and Nekhil, with forces at Gaza and Beersheba. During the next few months, Kress von Kressenstein commanded mobile units and launched a series of raids and attacks in an attempt to disrupt the traffic on the Suez Canal. Oh, man. Anytime I see his fucking name. Oh, yeah. Anyways, Colonel Kress von Kressenstein did all that he could to keep the British occupied, launching an attack on the 8th of April of 1915, when a mine was placed in the Suez Canal. Oh, how devious! Which was located and disabled. Oh, they disabled it. The British disabled it. But he was being a little devious boy, and that's fine. And between the 5th and 13th of May of 1915, he personally led a charge. Kress was out there in the field, doing what he got to do. And during the Gallipoli campaign, these tactics were abandoned. Von Kressenstein also demanded German special forces, which were promised to arrive in February of 1916, to prepare another expedition against the canal. He was going to take that canal or die trying! He moved to the headquarters of the 4th Army in Ain Sofar in August, then to the new headquarters in Jerusalem, and waited for German specialists. However, the Ottoman line of communication was extended towards Egypt, with the completion of the 100-mile section of the Ottoman Railway to Beersheba, which was opened on the 17th of October 1915. Right, and then von Kressenstein's Veds confirmed the impracticality identified by Lord Kitchener, Secretary of State for War in November of 1914, of defending the Suez Canal from the western side. Near the end of 1915, with the Gallipoli campaign drawing to an end, the cabinet authorized new positions to be established in the desert, about 11,000 yards or 10 kilometers east of the canal, strengthening defense of the canal against long-range guns, and agreed to provide additional troops. So, good on them. They realized the importance, but they're still kind of futile because you kind of get fucked over there regardless. At the end of 1915, General Sir John Maxwell was with headquarters at Cairo, had responsibility for the troops in the Egyptian Delta, the Western Desert, and the Sudan, and administered martial law over the whole region, including the Suez Canal. The British War Office controlled the Levant base, which was responsible for administering British Empire forces in Salonika, Gallipoli, and Mesopotamia, and India, and it had its headquarters at Alexandria. The retreating forces on Gallipoli and divisions from the United Kingdom formed the Mediterranean Expeditionary Force, commanded by Lieutenant General Sir Archibald Murray, which fucking Germany should learn how to name its forces better. Okay, Mediterranean Expeditionary Force. 3 words. Not like the 6 to 10 word bullshit that they were giving us earlier. Anyways, Murray believed a British advance into Sinai to occupy the Katia would be more cost-effective than the static defenses recently established. The War Office agreed to this. They're like, yeah, you might be right. But not to his more ambitious plan to advance on the Ottoman border. They're like, no, just don't do that. We don't have troops for that. Kind of got our shit kicked in at Gallipoli. We lost Donkey Buddy as well, and we're still really sad about that. Anyways, Murray believed that the area captured in an advance to El Arish or Rafah could be held with fewer troops than would be needed for a passive defense of the Suez Canal, which is true, because passively defending the Suez Canal, you need a fuck ton more troops to cover that entire area. So just to cover like that one little spot, much easier, much better. Murray had estimated a force of 250,000 could cross the Sinai, and that 80,000 troops could be maintained in the Katia area. If such a large Ottoman force were to reach Katia, then the British would need a very large force to defend the Suez Canal as well. So they're just trying to, determine, like, should we just keep the forces here defending Suez, or should we go try and capture these areas? With the canal still being very vital to a lot of other operations currently going on, I could see why they were still hesitant of sending that many troops across the Sinai. British occupation of the Oasis area, which stretched eastwards from Romani and Katia to Bir el Abed along the ancient Silk Road, would deny drinking water to any Ottoman invasion force. Again, good, dehydrate your enemies. Make them little husks by the time they try to get back. Murray planned a 50,000 strong garrison in the Katia area and obtained authority to build a pipeline to pump fresh Nile water and a railway to transport the infantry divisions and their supplies. So, that also would really help that area later on. He also decided to empty the water cisterns at Moya Harab, so the central Sinai route could not again be used by Ottoman columns advancing from Palestine, and to maintain some troops at Suez to defend the town. These operations began in February of 1916, when construction started on the 25-mile stretch of the 4-foot and 8-inch standard gauge Sinai railway and water pipeline from Kantara to Katia. So it's just really thick. I guess it's only 4 feet, it's gauged. It's not too bad, but I mean, it's still pretty thick for that time to like lay down that much for 25 miles. That's kind of insane. By the end of March or early April, 16 miles of the track, including sidings, had been laid. The intact water cistern and wells on the central road across the Sinai are still enable Ottoman forces to threaten the canal at any time, sadly. Between the 11th and 15th of April, 25 Bekaner Camel Corps, 10 engineers with 12 men from the 8th Light Horse Regiment and 117 men from the 9th Light Horse Regiment. With the 127 Egyptian Camel Transport Corps, traveled 52 miles to destroy a well-boring plant. Gins erected on the wells, the water wells, and pumping equipment at Jaffa. They captured an Austrian engineer, officer, and 33 men, 4 of whom were wounded and killed 6 Ottoman soldiers. Because fuck the Ottomans. Assholes kicked our asses recently. They deserve that shit. That's probably what they're thinking. But no, the Ottomans. It's kind of sad that they decided to kill the Easterners, but they let the Germans, for the most part, get away. Because especially with what the Germans would do later on. Anyways, on the 9th of June of 1916, units from the number 2 section of the Canal defenses formed the Muksheb column, consisting of part of the 3rd Light Horse Brigade, 900 camels, non-fighting units, and camel transport escorted by 1 squadron of the 9th Light Horse Regiment, and 10 Buccaneer Camel Corps. The engineers drained pools and cisterns of 5 million gallons of water in the Wadi Muksheb, sealed the cisterns to prevent them refilling during next season's rains, and returned on the 14th of June. Kind of a dick move for like people that just kind of lived over there, but maybe it wasn't too many people. At the same time, a detachment of Middlesex yeomanry advanced to Moya Kharab. With the central Sinai route now denied to them, Ottoman forces could only advance towards the Suez Canal along the northern coast. They kind of, essentially, by doing all this work, they're sort of funneling all of them into one line. I can speak English. I swear to God, I'm a native speaker. You'd think that my tongue wouldn't get so twide. Goddamn stupid tongue. Work right. Do your goddamn job and talk. Okay, so they're funneling all of them into the northern channel, right? So all the Ottoman troops are essentially getting forced into, very similar to how the Persian forces were forced into Thermopylae, like along that central pass. So their numbers aren't going to mean jack shit, really. And they'll be very easy to kind of track and defend, as long as it's just against that one route. Okay. Kress von Kressenstein launched a surprise attack on Easter Sunday because that's what Jesus told me to do. Jesus would love it if we attacked on Easter Sunday. Also St. George's Day, because fuck St. George! I hate him! On the 23rd of April of 1916. East of the canal and north of El Ferdan Station. The Yeomanry 5th Mounted Brigade were guarding the water pipeline and railway being built out into the desert towards Romani. While the 3 regiments were widely dispersed, squadrons were surprised and overwhelmed at Katia and Ogratina, east of Romani, suffering the loss of about 2 squadrons. So, they did get a little fucked up. Quest did his job. We did pretty good there, yeah. Fighting for the Oasis area during a raid on Katia and Ogratina demonstrated its importance to both sides. Both of them realized, oh fuck, we need this area. This is the area that we need. From a base in the Oasis, a large number of Ottoman troops could threaten the Suez Canal and control the Sinai Peninsula with the threat of a flank attack. They could easily flank the British on any of their sides. The Australian 2nd Light Horse Brigade and New Zealand Mounted Rifles Brigades of Major General Harry Chauvel's Australian and New Zealand Mounted Division, again, we're back with Anzac, were ordered to occupy the Romani area the day after the fighting at Katia and Ogratina, here 23 miles from Kantara. They aggressively patrolled and they got the area. They kind of just ran a little map of the area, and they would make sure like nothing got in or nothing got out. All right. Until the railway and the water pipeline to Pelusium Station of Romani were built, all water, food, which were mainly bully beef and biscuits, because it's the fucking British and that's all they ate was, biscuits. And also the transport methods didn't allow for any fresh meat or vegetables, really. And their shelters and other equipment and ammunition had to be carried to this position by the Egyptian Camel Transport Corps. Those camels carried this war on their fucking back, both figuratively and literally. With flies attracted to horse litter, provision of safe sanitation was a constant battle. Incinerators were constructed to burn refuse by stacking used bully beef tins filled with sand, which is, good way to do it. just burn the shit out of everything. I guess it kind of helped. Not any worse than what we're doing today. We still incinerate a lot of shit. They literally incinerated shit back then. So good on them. During this period, men had to patrol constantly despite poor diet, severe weather conditions, little shelter from the sun, and very few rest periods. A journal from A.B. Patterson, who was a remounts officer, goes, in April of 1916, everything's being hurried up. The big English flying school near our camp has been ordered to turn out as many pilots as quickly as possible. And there is an average of 18 planes in the air all day long, just over our heads. The din is indescribable, but the horses never look up, or otherwise takes the slightest of notice of the planes. The life of a pilot, computed in flying hours, is pitifully short. Many of them are killed while learning, because they can't fly for shit. My wife is working as a voluntary aide at the hospital in Ismailia, and she and her associates are constantly making shrouds for these boys that have perhaps made one little mistake in the first solo flight, and have paid for it with their lives. The Army will do anything, in reason, for these youngsters. We are ordered to let them have riding horses, and we occasionally turn out quite a credible hunt with the Saluki hounds after jackals. We like to go hunting for jackals because that's what you do when you're bored here in Egypt. Not much else to do. Luckily, I have my wife. Too bad she isn't one none of Junior A.B. Patterson right now. I'd go for a round or two and keeps telling me no. So, gotta deal with that. That's all. A.B. Patterson out. During May 1916, Ottoman aircraft flew over the Suez Canal, dropping bombs on Port Said, which caused 23 casualties. On the 18th of May, the Ottoman occupied the town and aerodrome at El Arish, which was bombed by order of Colonel W.G.H. Salmond, commander of the 5th Wing, in reprisal for the first Ottoman raids. And on the 22nd of May, the Royal Flying Corps bombed all the camps on a 45-mile front parallel to the canal. So they just carpet bombed the shit out of everything. We still kind of use that tactic. You just kind of pick an area and you drop a bunch of bombs in a line. You don't care. Anybody that's under there is going to get fucking blown to smithereens, and that is the goal. By the middle of May, the railway had been complete to Romani, making it possible to bring up enough stores and equipment to deploy the 52nd Lowland Division there. As soon as they arrived, they began to dig trenches in the sand, creating a defensive line with redoubts from Mahmedia near the Mediterranean coast south to Khatib Ganit high point in front of Romani. So you're able to get kind of far. You can start digging those trenches again, because it's World War I. You have to dig fucking trenches. Ottoman army units retaliated to the increased British Empire presence at the beginning of June, with the first of many air raids on Romani killing 8 troopers from the 1st Light Horse Brigade and wounding 22. And about 100 horses were sadly also lost. And Alexander the Great cried as many of his, descendants from his love affair with his horse Bucephalus had been killed. At this time, the forward Ottoman air base was at Bir el Mazar, which was 42 miles east of the Romani. Early reconnaissances by the Anzac Mounted Division covered considerable distances from Romani as far as Ogratina to Bir el Abd and Bir Bayud. The longest raid was made on the 31st of May of 1916 by the New Zealand Mounted Rifle Brigade to Salamana, covering 100 kilometers or 62 miles in 36 hours. It's pretty good. It's pretty good for back then. That's a long ass trip for sure. 62 miles today is nothing to scoff at either. And it's still, depending on traffic in your area, it could be anywhere from like hour to 2 to 3 hour trip. Fucking crazy. Just thinking about how easy that is now, and back then how much of a trek that was, and to make it in 36 hours was kind of insane. Anyways, after the middle of May, and in particular from mid-June to the end of July, the heat in the Sinai Desert ranged from extreme to fierce. It was getting hot in there, and people were not wanting to take off all the clothes because they didn't want to get fucking shot. Even worse for the British were the Khamsin dust storms, which blow once every 50 days for a few hours or several days, turning the atmosphere into a haze of floating sand particles flung about by a hot southerly wind. So fucking hot. Hot southerly wind daddies. The Anzac troops and their commanders, unused to the conditions, suffered considerably from heat stroke and thirst during these early patrols. Again, because they're used to very cloudy weather, and they're used to complaining about rain, not fucking heat storms all day and dust storms. One such patrol, returning during the hottest part of the day after a sleepless night far from base and very little water, suffered casualties of around 160 men who collapsed from heat exhaustion. 160 people died just from this goddamn heat. Not only was it people killing people, but God was killing people because he was kind of getting sick and tired of people killing people. He's like, fuck guys, just fucking don't. Anyways, an important innovation in the getting of water, which enabled the mounted units to operate more effectively over wide areas of rocky desert areas and sand dunes on reconnaissance, was the spear point. It was developed by Australian engineers, designed to be attached to a pump. It was a 2.5-inch pipe, pointed, perforated, and covered with a sheet of fine perforated brass. This was driven down into the water area by means of a small pulley bar and monkey, like a literal fucking monkey. They brought monkeys over here, and the monkey's the one who kind of slams into the ground. Obviously not. Monkey's just another tool. Okay. Or by a sledgehammer, and additional lengths of pipe were added if necessary. Could you fucking imagine, though, if they had monkeys out in World War I just like slamming brass metal pipes into the ground to get them water? Yeah, that would, I would believe it too. Like I wouldn't put it past the British. They were kind of enslaving everything at that point. The ordinary general service lift and force pump was then attached. This arrangement proved so efficient that spear points were issued to every squadron in the division, and the RE troops carried a number of them. These men were thus enabled to get water at any of the haunts in the desert in a very short space of time. Made it way fucking easier for them. Once the brackish water was found, a medical officer assessed it as either drinking water, horse water, or not fit for horses, and signs were erected. So if you had to sign up with, like it was just for a horse, you're okay. If it was drinking water, they like for dudes or like for the British or for the French, you could drink it. I wish I could find like the actual signs. It'd be pretty funny to find that. Anyways, we get to the Battle of Romani now. The Battle of Romani took place near the Egyptian town of that name, obviously 23 miles east of the Suez Canal. Shortly after midnight on the 3rd or 4th of August, so 3rd of August, midnight to the 4th of August, early morning, until the invading force retired during the late morning and afternoon of the 5th of August. The Central Powers force of Austrians, Germans, and Ottomans, led by Kress von Kressenstein, sought to stop the British Empire reclaiming the Egyptian territory of the Sinai Peninsula and cut the Suez Canal by bringing it within artillery range. It numbered 12,000, mainly from 3rd Infantry Division, with Bedouin irregulars, who are these crazy motherfuckers. No, they're not that crazy. They're just regular troops. Anyways, German machine gunners and Austrian artillery from Pasha 1. Romani was defended by the 52nd Lowland Division and the 1st and 2nd Light Horse Brigades and some Anzac troops. There was sustained fighting began in the early hours by about 11 o'clock, 1100 on the 4th of August. The Austrian, German, and Ottoman force had pushed the 2 Australian brigades back to a point where the 52nd Lowland Division was in the trenches. They were able to attack the attackers' right flank. And the New Zealand Mounted Rifle and 5th Mounted Brigades arrived in the combined Allied fire, arrived in time to extend the Australian light horses' line. So they got there just in time to keep them from getting completely stomped on. The Ottoman advance was stopped by the command Allied fire from the infantry and the mounted troops. Deep sand, the midday heat, and thirst as well. In midsummer desert conditions, the British infantry were unable to move effectively to pursue the retreating columns the next day, and alone, the Anzac Mounted Division was unable to attack and capture von Kressenstein's large force, which made an orderly retreat to Katia, because I can't have my people getting slaughtered like that. And we eventually got back to our base at Bir el Abd. I know I'm fucking that up, but I don't know how Germans would be able to pronounce that. Anyways, that got abandoned on the 12th of August of 1916 after fierce fighting, and during an attack by the Anzac Mounted Division on the 9th of August at the extremity of British Empire lines of communication. This was the first substantial Allied victory against the Ottoman Empire in World War I, ending the defense of the Suez Canal campaign. The canal was never again threatened by land forces. During the remainder of the war, the Allies went on the offensive for 7 months, pushing the Ottoman army back across the Sinai Peninsula, fighting the battles of Magdaba and Rafah before being stopped on Ottoman soil in southern Palestine at the First Battle of Gaza. Okay, so before we get to the Arab revolts and Lawrence of Arabia, there is a quick little shout out that I want to give, who are also very vital in this war, and it's the South Persia Rifles. So the South Persia Rifles was a British recruited force to counter German and Ottoman influence in southern Persia. The British formed these South Persian Rifles in response to the German influence in southern Iran in 1915 and early 1916. The German agents influenced tribal groups who were already in rebellion against the British. As a result, the British had to divert troops to Iran rather than Ottoman Iraq. The South Persia Rifles was a measure to use locally raised troops rather than British or Indian units, so that the latter could be sent to the main campaign against the Ottomans in Iraq. With the assent of the Shah's government, the British were allowed to form a military force of up to 11,000 men to quell the resistive tribes and maintain order. So essentially these guys, who I was kind of talking about earlier with like the Egyptians and the other tribes in this area that they were able to rally up and like have dudes fighting and stop rebellions and resistances against them because, again, nobody fucks with the queen, right? The queen controls everything. She is a lizard person who eats the adrenochrome of babies. She was eating Egyptian babies. Come on, guys. Think with your brains. Clearly, this is what this all means. This is everything I was talking about. I'd like to apologize for that little rant that I just went on. I don't mean to speak ill of the dead, but you know when you have those moments where you just kind of go almost completely stupid? That was one of those. And I don't know why I let that get to me. I don't know why I took that stupid pill when I recorded that initially. So, again, I'm sorry. Was this just a well-orchestrated attempt by me to excuse myself and let myself get a drink? And that's why I recorded that? So I could break this up? And yeah, it was. I was a little thirsty, so that's why I recorded that. So I could then cut it and then do a little pause, get a sip, and continue on reading this great, compelling war and battle fought by British and Ottoman empires. So anyways, let's continue on. Now we move on to the Arab revolts, who the British supported this Arab revolt against the Ottoman Empire. It was led by his sheriff, Hussein of Mecca, and his sons, and the famed T.E. Lawrence, or Lawrence of Arabia. So, the rise, we're going to go back a little bit again. We're going to go back a little bit so that way we can understand why the Arabs would even want to revolt. A lot of this was due to the rise of nationalism in the Ottoman Empire, which dated back from at least 1821. Arab nationalism has its roots in the Mashriq, particularly in countries of the Levant. The political orientation of Arab nationalists before World War I was generally moderate. Kind of like most people. Most people are pretty moderate in their views. Not too much government, just enough government, but also don't fuck with certain things that I need. Their demands were of a reformist nature and generally limited to autonomy, a greater use of Arabic in education, and changes in peacetime conscription in the Ottoman Empire to allow Arab conscripts local service in the Ottoman army. So they just wanted basic fucking rights, essentially. The Young Turk Revolution began on the 3rd of July of 1908 and quickly spread throughout the empire. As a result, Sultan Abdul Hamid II was forced to announce the restoration of the 1876 constitution and the reconvening of the Ottoman Parliament. Also, during this time, the Young Turks were really trying to get rid of a certain race of people called the Armenians. It's really fucking sad. Look it up. Armenian genocide. Okay, I won't go over it today. That might be a quarrel that I do later. Just the Young Turks versus Armenians. Kind of fucked up because it's not really a quarrel. It's more one-sided hatred. That'd be like me doing an episode of the Nazis versus Jewish people. Very similar. So maybe I won't do that. Maybe I will. I don't know. We'll see. The period is known as the Second Constitutional Era. In the 1908 elections, the Young Turks Committee of Union and Progress, or CUP, or CUP, they made you see their P, managed to gain the upper hand against the Liberal Union, led by the Sultanazad Sabahaddin, or, just Sultan Sabahaddin. The new parliament had 142 Turks, 60 Arabs, 25 Albanians, 23 Greeks, 12 Armenians, surprisingly, including 4 Dashnaks and 2 Khunjaks, 5 Jews, 4 Bulgarians, 3 Serbs, and 1 Vlach. The CUP, I'm not fucking with you, by the way. That is, yes, so Committee of Union and Progress. They wanted to just use Committee Union Progress as the acronym, so CUP. Now gave more emphasis to centralization and modernization. It preached a message that was a mixture of pan-Islamism, Ottomanism, and pan-Turkism, which was adjusted as the conditions warranted. At heart, the CUP were Turkish nationalists who wanted to see the Turks as the dominant group within the Ottoman Empire, which antagonized the Arab leaders and prompted them to think in similarly nationalistic terms. They're like, well, if the Turks are going to do it, we should do it too. Arab members of parliament supported the counter-coup of 1909, which aimed to dismantle the constitutional system and to restore the absolute monarchy of Sultan Abdul Hamid II. The dethroned sultan attempted to restore the Ottoman Caliphate by putting an end to the secular policies of the Young Turks. But he was, in turn, driven away to exile in Selanik by the 31st of March incident, in which the Young Turks defeated the counter-coup, and he was eventually replaced by his brother Mehmed V. In 1913, intellectuals and politicians from the Mashriq met in Paris at the First Arab Congress. They produced a set of demands for greater autonomy and equality within the Ottoman Empire, including for elementary and secondary education in Arab lands to be delivered in Arabic, for peacetime Arab conscripts to the Ottoman army to serve near their home region, and for at least 3 Arab ministers in the Ottoman cabinet. Which I'm sure you know how well that went over. It is estimated that the Arab forces... It didn't go over well, in case you didn't. Arab forces involved in the revolt numbered around 5,000 soldiers. This number, however, probably applies to the Arab regulars who fought during the Sinai and Palestine campaign with Edmund Allenby's Egyptian Expeditionary Force, and not the irregular forces under the direction of T.E. Lawrence and Faisal. So, speaking of T.E. Lawrence, let's go ahead and get into his life. Thomas Edward Lawrence was born on the 16th of August in 1888 in Tremadoc, Carnarvonshire. His Anglo-Irish father, Thomas Chapman, had left his wife Edith after he had a first son with Sarah Junner, who had been governess to his daughters. Sarah had herself been an illegitimate child, having been born in Sunderland, as the daughter of Elizabeth Junner, a servant employed by a family named Lawrence. She was dismissed 4 months before Sarah was born, and identified Sarah's father as John Junner, shipwright journeyman. Lawrence's parents did not marry but lived together under the pseudonym Lawrence. So he kind of comes from like a broken home, sort of. You know, he's troubled. So it makes him all the more mysterious. In 1914, his father inherited the Chapman baronetcy based at Killua Castle, the ancestral family home in County Westmeath, Ireland. The couple had 5 sons. Thomas, called Ned by his immediate family, being the second eldest. From Wales, the family moved to Kirkcudbright, Galloway, in southwestern Scotland, then to Dinard in Brittany, then to Jersey. They went to Jersey and they got some hot dogs. They were on the Jersey Shore before it was popular. I wish. The family lived at Langley Lodge, now demolished, from 1894 to 1896, set in private woods between the eastern borders of New Forest and Southampton Water in Hampshire. The residence was isolated, and young Lawrence had many opportunities for outdoor activities and waterfront visits. His favorite thing to do was to go out into the woods and stare at any couple skinny dipping. It was said that he would stay in bushes for roughly 3 to 6 hours, just beating it off while he watched a couple skinny dip near the waterfront that he lived at. In the summer of 1896, the family moved to 2 Polstead Road in Oxford after they discovered Thomas's bush beating. I'm kidding. I'm kidding. They did move there, but could you imagine if that was why? Just good old Tommy was just in the bushes, just jacking it off all the time. And they're like, well, we can't have any of that, so let's get Tommy out of there. Oh, God. Lawrence attended the city of Oxford High School for boys from 1896 until 1907, and only boys were allowed. It was a boys' club, no girls allowed, only which is actually sadly true for back then. That's excuse me. Really fucked up, but that's how they were. This is where one of the 4 houses was later named Lawrence in his honor after his deeds. The school would close in 1966, however. The school was reportedly closed down due to an outbreak of shower jerkers and other jerking of sorts going on, since it was an all-boys club and no one knew how to keep it in their fucking pants. Continuing on, Lawrence claimed that he ran away from home around 1905 and served for a few weeks as a boy soldier with the Royal Garrison Artillery at St. Mawes Castle in Cornwall, from which he was bought out. There's not a whole lot else of Lawrence didn't seem to really lie or care to lie all that much. His life was interesting enough as is. So I kind of believe that probably happened. But at the age of 15, Lawrence and his school friend Cyril Beeson cycled around Berkshire, Buckinghamshire. The fuck, England? Your fucking weird ass names. Just so many fucking Bucking and Hampshires, and you can go shire your ass. Actually, I love the Shire from the Lord of the Rings. I love you, England. I love people from England. I had a buddy, Warren, who moved from England to Utah once in junior high, and he was a cool guy. Super cool. Miss him. Should have tried to stay in touch, but I'm terrible at doing that. So I don't know if that's just like an ADHD thing where it's like out of sight. You just don't think about it, but you still care about the person. Happens to me a lot. Anyways, continuing on. Visiting almost every village's parish church, studying their monuments and antiquities, and making rubbings of their monumental brasses. He liked to rub brasses. And again, I think because of this is why I put in so many jerk off. He was probably beaten in the bushes and whatnot. He just really liked to rub things out. And later on in life, which we won't get into, but if I ever did a full episode on Lawrence, it was just Lawrence's life, I might get into it a little more. But he was kind of weird. He'd do some weird shit. I don't know. Just Google him. It's interesting. Lawrence and Beeson monitored building sites in Oxford and presented the Ashmolean Museum with anything that they found, which probably wasn't a whole bunch, but they did what they could as they were kids. The Ashmolean's annual report, well, I guess he wasn't really a kid. He was probably about 18 almost there. But anyways, they had an annual report for 1906 that said that two teenage boys, by incessant watchfulness, secured everything of antiquarian value which had been found. They were pretty good at their goddamn jobs there. In the summers of 1906 and 1907, Lawrence toured France by bicycle, sometimes with Beeson, collecting photographs, drawings, and measurements of medieval castles. Where he liked to measure stuff, that's what he was into. Don't blame him. In August of 1907, Lawrence wrote home, "The Chignons and the Lamballe people complimented me on my wonderful French. I have been asked twice since I arrived what part of France I came from." Again, He was no stranger to humble bragging. This man loved to humble brag all the fucking time. From 1907 to 1910, Lawrence read history at Jesus College, Oxford. That's right. There's a Jesus College. It's where Jesus went to school to learn to be Jesus. And that's how you can learn to be a Jesus of sorts. Or if you're Hispanic, you probably already are a Jesus, in which case, congratulations, you can pick up your degree at Oxford. In July and August of 1908, he cycled 2,200 miles solo through France to the Mediterranean and back, researching French castles. This is where the Tour de France would come from. I'm kidding, of course. Could you imagine? I could actually see that. I could see them doing that. Just, creating like a little race after this great historical figure, which, I mean, that's how marathons were started, because of the Battle of Marathon. So, In the summer of 1909, he set out alone on a 3-month walking tour of Crusader castles in Ottoman Syria, during which he traveled 1,000 miles on foot. Holy shit! Ugh, but he had some blisters on his goddamn feet. While at Jesus, he was a keen member of University Officers Training Corps, or OTC. He graduated with first-class honors after submitting a thesis titled The Influence of the Crusaders on European Military Architecture to the end of the 12th century. Partly based on his field research with Beeson in France and his solo research in France and the Middle East. Lawrence was fascinated by the Middle Ages. His brother Arnold wrote in 1937 that medieval researchers were a dream way of escape from bourgeois of England. Again, positive everyone back then spoke like the old-timey announcer. That's why we're going to do that. In 1910, Lawrence was offered the opportunity to become a practicing archaeologist at Carchemish in the expedition that D.G. Hogarth was setting up on behalf of the British Museum. Hogarth arranged a senior demi-ship for Lawrence at Magdalen, which, again, the demi-ship is like a scholarship of sorts, at Magdalen College, Oxford, to fund his work for €100 a year. Just goddamn cheap. But I guess back then it was a lot of money. Not like a lot, but like quite a bit. Like definitely more than now. I'm not even going to do the math, but it's quite a bit more now. He sailed for Beirut in December of 1910 and went to Byblos, where he studied Arabic. He then went to work on excavations at Carchemish near Jerablus in northern Syria, where he worked under Hogarth R. Campbell Thompson of the British Museum and Leonard Woolley until 1914. He later stated that everything which he had accomplished he owed to Hogarth. Pretty big praise to Hogarth there. Lawrence would meet his future spouse Gertrude Bell while excavating at Carchemish. He worked briefly with Flinders Petrie in 1912 at Kaf Merahmar in Egypt. At Carchemish, Lawrence was involved in a high-tension relationship with a German-led team working nearby on the Baghdad Railway at Jerablus. While there was never open combat, there was regular conflict over access to land and treatment of the local workforce. Lawrence gained experience in Middle Eastern leadership practices and conflict resolution. This has helped him greatly to get, this revolt started later. So, in January of 1914, Woolley and Lawrence were co-opted by the British military as an archaeological smokescreen for a British military survey of the Negev desert. It was like undercover work. Lawrence was like a spy at this point. They were funded by the Palestine Exploration Fund to search for an area referred to in the Bible as the Wilderness of Zin, or Zion. And they made an archaeological survey of the Negev desert along the way. The Negev was strategically important as an Ottoman army attacking Egypt would have to cross it. Woolley and Lawrence subsequently published a report of the expedition's archaeological findings, but a more important result was updated mapping of the area, with special attention to features of military relevance, such as water sources. Lawrence also visited Aqaba and Shobek, not far from Petra, which is really fucking cool. I want to go to Petra one day. It'd be really nice to see. But so essentially, this work here is what allowed them to map this area, and it's what's going to allow them to kick the Ottomans' ass. Part of the main issue in the Gallipoli campaign is they didn't have good enough maps or resources or an understanding of their area. Due to Lawrence's work here, the military would gain a ton of strategic knowledge for the area for the war. It would help them out quite a bit. Following the outbreak of hostilities in August of 1914, Lawrence did not immediately enlist in the British Army. He held back until October on the advice of S.F. Newcomb, when he was commissioned on the general list as temporary second lieutenant interpreter. So essentially, he would have been like top dog over there, but he didn't want to yet. He held back until his buddy essentially told him to fucking do it, because they're like, we need people who can actually speak the fucking language and who actually understands these people. We don't need more assholes like Jim over there who's just shoving, his gun up people's butts. We don't need that. We need you. We need you who knows everyone to get in there to work for us. And he went ahead and got to work. So, before the end of the year, he was summoned by renowned archaeologist and historian Lieutenant Commander David Hogarth, his mentor at Carchemish, to the new Arab Bureau of Intelligence unit in Cairo. And he arrived in Cairo on the 15th of December of 1914. The Bureau's chief was Brigadier General Gilbert Clayton, who reported to Egyptian High Commissioner Henry McMahon. Henry McMahon. Vince McMahon's double great grandfather. He was known to be a fanatic and loved to wrestle, but then he would pay people to let him win, which is what would eventually lead to the idea of WWE. I wish. That'd be kind of cool if there was some relation there. I did look that up, but sadly, no actual relation. The situation was complex during 1915. There was growing Arab nationalist movement within the Arabic-speaking Ottoman territories, including many Arabs serving in the Ottoman armed forces, which causes a bit of a conflict of interest, when you're trying to recruit someone that's already working for the enemy in some stances. But again, those were mostly conscripted forces. They were kind of forced to. They were in contact with Sharif Hussein, Emir of Mecca, who was negotiating with the British and offering to lead an Arab uprising against the Ottomans. In exchange, he wanted some British ash. He specifically wanted the most British woman that they could possibly find. He said to make sure that she had biscuits on her breath still when they brought her to him. That and a guarantee of an independent Arab state, including the Hijaz, Syria, and Mesopotamia. But again, Crumpet Breath Beth needed to be there. And if she wasn't, he wasn't going to do shit for the British. Oh, I wish. That'd be so great. Such an uprising would have been helpful to Britain in its war against the Ottomans, lessening the threat against the Suez Canal, which was of vital importance, which we already went over quite a bit. However, there was resistance from French diplomats who insisted that Syria's future was a French colony, not an independent Arab state. There were also strong objections from the government of India, which was nominally part of the British government and acted independently. Its vision was of Mesopotamia under British control, serving as a granary for India, because they wanted to make sure India was fed and they could keep exploiting the fuck out of the Indians there. It wanted to hold on to its Arabian outpost in Aden. At the Arab Bureau, Lawrence supervised the preparation of maps, produced a daily bulletin for the British generals operating in the theater, and interviewed prisoners. He was an advocate of British landing at Alexandretta, which never came to pass, because, people were dumb. He was also a consistent advocate of an independent Arab Syria. He wanted to make sure that they were taken care of because he actually was fair and, cared about people and didn't just care about Britain or the United Kingdom. The situation came to a crisis in October of 1915 as Sharif Hussein demanded an immediate commitment from Britain with the threat that he would otherwise throw his weight behind the Ottomans. Which, not really much of a threat. It was more of he's going to do it because Britain's not, going to appease him. And he also knew the Ottomans weren't, but at least he'd keep the status quo. And then that way he could fuck over, the British and maybe get some, cred with the Ottoman Empire. That would let him get some more, maybe some more territory, a little more leniency on some things. This would, this would create a pan-Islamic message that could have been dangerous for Britain, which was in severe difficulties in the Gallipoli campaign, as they were getting their asses kicked, remember, from the first episode. The British replied with a letter from High Commissioner McMahon that was generally agreeable, while reserving commitments concerning the Mediterranean coastline and Holy Land. They had to make sure the Church of England got Jerusalem back. It was theirs. Because, clearly the gospel was meant for white people and no one else. Fucking racist assholes back then. In the spring of 1916, Lawrence was dispatched to Mesopotamia to assist in relieving the siege of Kut by some combination of starting an Arab uprising and bribing Ottoman officials. The mission produced no useful results. He essentially got there, couldn't really do jack shit. Because, again, they weren't able to start an uprising quite yet, due to a whole bunch of different factors. Meanwhile, the Sykes-Picot Agreement was being negotiated in London without the knowledge of British officials in Cairo, which awarded a large proportion of Syria to France, further reducing Arabs' trust in Britain. Further, it implied that the Arabs would have to conquer Syria's 4 great cities if they were to have any sort of state there, which is Damascus, Homs, Hama, and Aleppo. It is unclear at what point Lawrence became aware of the treaty's contents. No one is sure if he knew after or before anything was signed, essentially. Okay, so, kind of getting back really into the main timeline of the war now. We're back to 1916. Lawrence obtained assistance from the Royal Navy to turn back an Ottoman attack on Yenbu in December of 1916. Lawrence's major contribution to the revolt was convincing Arab leaders Faisal and Abdullah to coordinate their actions in support of a British strategy. Where essentially he was like, well, hey there, guys, y'all should, go ahead and just move in with us. See, watch this. If you guys take your forces and ram into the men here, then we're going to be able to take our guys and have them ram into the men over there, and we're going to fuck them up. And then Fasil was like, it's a great idea. That's, that's super good to know. Also, just so you're aware, I know you keep mentioning about ramming dudes a lot. There's actually quite a few governors here that are super into white skinny boys like you. You should be just a little careful out there. And then Lawrence was like, what? What are you talking about? And then Fasil was like, don't worry about it. It doesn't matter. You probably won't even meet any of those guys anyways. But just, don't drop this up. Lawrence developed a close relationship with Faisal, whose Arab northern army was to become the main beneficiary of British aid. By contrast, Lawrence's relations with Abdullah were not as good. So Abdullah's Arab Eastern Army received considerably less in way of British aid. Essentially because, Lawrence wasn't as good at buddies with Abdullah, and his relations were not all that great. Again, probably, fucked his sister or something. Probably should have looked that up. Not entirely certain why they weren't amazing. I think there was just some arguments and disagreements on how things should be done. Or treatment of certain people when I was reading through the book, but doesn't matter. Anyways, Lawrence would go on to persuade the Arabs not to drive the Ottomans out of Medina. Instead, the Arabs attacked the Hejaz railway on many occasions. This tied up more Ottoman troops, who were forced to protect the railway and repair the constant damage. Essentially, forcing them to waste their time and to get more troops away from key areas and strategic point of interest. So on the 1st of December of 1916, Fakhri Pasha began an offensive with 3 brigades out of Medina with the aim of taking the port of Yanbu. At first, Fakhri's troops defeated the Hashemite forces in several engagements and seemed set to take Yanbu. It was fire and air support from the 5 ships of the Royal Navy, Red Sea Patrol, that defeated the Ottoman attempts to take Yanbu with heavy losses on the 11th to 12th of December of 1916. Fakhri then turned his forces south to take Rabeg, but owing to the guerrilla attacks on his flanks and supply lines, air attacks from the newly established Royal Flying Corps base at Yambu, and the overextension of his supply lines, he was forced to turn back on the 18th of January of 1917 to Medina. This was a huge-ass win for them. They finally turned back. This huge-ass Ottoman force. They had already been getting their asses kicked over in the Gallipoli campaign. The Ottomans and the Germans were thinking, maybe the British aren't shit, and we got this. But over here, they were able to be very strategic, use resources and men correctly to do guerrilla-based warfare, and that's how you win. That's how you win these battles. It's a slow, methodical process of ticking and wearing your enemy down. The coastal city of Wej was to be the base for attacks on the Hejaz Railway. And so on the 3rd of January 1917, Faisal began an advance northward along the Red Sea coast with 5,100 camel riders. My God, I can speak English. 5,300 men on foot, 4 Krupp mountain guns, 10 machine guns, and 380 baggage camels. Lots of camels. Lots of camel fucking going on too. The Royal Navy resupplied Faisal from the sea during his march on Wej. Something. That city. Wejh. Fuck. While the 800-man Ottoman garrison prepared for an attack from the south, a landing party of 400 Arabs and 200 Royal Navy bluejackets attacked Wejh from the north on the 23rd of January of 1917. They surrendered within 36 hours, and the Ottomans abandoned their advance toward Mecca in favor of a defensive position in Medina, with small detachments scattered along the Hejaz Railway. Because, they were getting their shit kicked in. They were getting their asses rocked, yo. Some crazy-ass shit right here. So, the Arab force had increased to about 70,000 men, armed with 28,000 rifles, and deployed in 3 main groups. Ali's force threatened Medina. Abdullah operated from Wadi Ais, harassing Ottoman communications and capturing their supplies, and also harassing their men. He'd capture them and slowly torture them. He'd sometimes cook them and force them to eat each other. But only bits of them. So everyone would stay alive. He'd just slice off strips of their ass and make them eat their own ass. He was very creative with what he did. So, go him. Anyways, camel-mounted Arab raiding parties had an effective radius of about 1,000 miles, which is insane. 1,000 miles! That's crazy. They had carried their own food and taken water from a system of wells approximately 100 miles apart. Amazing. Just crazy how you could survive out in that desert. Anyways, in the late 1916, the Allies started the formation of the regular Arab army, also known as the Sharifiyan army raised from Ottoman Arab POWs. Because again, a lot of the Arabs were conscripted and they didn't really care to be fighting for the Ottomans. They're kind of well, fuck these people. They just didn't want to fucking die or have their families get killed. So, makes sense how they're able to do that pretty easily. The soldiers of the regular army wore British-style uniforms with the keffiyehs, and unlike the tribal guerrillas, fought full-time and in conventional battles. Some of the more notable former Ottoman officers to fight in the revolt were Nuri as-Said, Jafar al-Askari, and Aziz Ali al-Mizri. They were all pretty badass and shit. Still not as badass as Lawrence, essentially getting this all set up and leading. Lawrence would ride in the battles too, by the way. He would ride and fight himself. Fucking crazy ass guy. Guy was wild. The Hejaz Railway, which was from Damascus to Mecca, it was a Damascus to Mecca pilgrim route built at great expense by the Ottoman Empire in the early 20th century, but quickly fell into disrepair after the Arab Revolt of 1917. The year of 1917 began well for the Hashemites when Emir Abdullah and his Arab Eastern Army ambushed an Ottoman convoy led by Ashraf Bey in the desert and captured 20,000 euros worth or pounds worth of gold coins that were intended to bribe the Bedouin into loyalty to the Sultan. So they had a heyday. They got paid, and they got paid good. I don't know why it was so great to be a fucking pirate, man. You steal shit. Steal shit from the rich. Hell yeah. The Hashemite guerrillas began attacking the Hejaz railway in early of 1917. Again, it was just this constant attack that they had to keep doing. But by the time of March, Ottoman force had joined by tribesmen from Jabal Shamar, led by Ibn Rashid, carried out a sweep of the Hejaz that did much damage to the Hashemite forces. However, the Ottoman failure to take... got a little ahead of myself. Anyways, Lawrence arranged a joint action with the Arab regulars and forces under the Abu Ta'i against the port city of Aqaba. This is now known as the Battle of Aqaba. Aqaba was the only remaining Ottoman port on the Red Sea and threatened the right flank of the Britain's Egyptian Expeditionary Force, defending Egypt and preparing to advance into Sanjak-Man of the Syria Vilayet. Capture of Aqaba would aid transfer of British supplies to the Arab revolt. It would really help them out a ton. So Lawrence and Auda left Wedge on the 9th of May 1917 with a party of 40 men to recruit a mobile force from Hawatat, a tribe located in the area. On the 6th of July, after an overland attack, Aqaba fell to those Arab forces with only a handful of casualties. Again, crazy. They essentially took Aqaba with like maybe 100 men total, I think. Anyway, after Aqaba, General Sir Edmund Allenby, the new commander-in-chief of the Egyptian Expeditionary Force, agreed to Lawrence's strategy for the revolt. Because like this was essentially Lawrence being like, all right, commander, look at my dick. Look at my penis. Look at how huge that is. Do you realize what I just did and what I just accomplished? Maybe I'm right about some things. The commander was like, yeah, that is a pretty big dick, so might as well. Go ahead, kid. You got it. You have everything that you need. So Lawrence now held a powerful position as an advisor to Faisal and a person who had Allenby's confidence. Lawrence was like the most powerful person in this war right now. He had everything going for him. Everybody wanted him. Everybody wanted a piece of Lawrence's ass. And I do mean his ass. Specifically his ass. And we'll get into that a little later. Anyways, Allenby acknowledged after the war, I gave him a free hand. His cooperation was marked by the utmost loyalty. And I never had anything but praise for his work, which, indeed, was invaluable throughout the campaign. He was the mainspring of the Arab movement and knew their language, their manners, and their mentality. Which is high praise coming from a commander. Basically saying that, like, Lawrence knew everything that we needed to know to get this revolt and get everything going. Lawrence then rode 150 miles to Suez to arrange the Royal Navy delivery of food and supplies for the 2,500 Arabs and the 700 Ottoman prisoners in Aqaba. Soon the city was co-occupied by a large Anglo-French flotilla, which included warships and seaplanes, which helped the Arabs secure their hold on Aqaba. It helped them capture and keep that area. Because they were all fed, they didn't have to like go out and try and get supplies or do raids elsewhere. They were able to now just kind of stay there and keep the area contained. Even as the Hashemite armies advanced, they still encountered sometimes fierce opposition from local residents. Like in July of 1917, residents of the town of Kerak fought against the Hashemite forces and turned them back. Later in the year, British intelligence reports suggested that most of the tribes in the region east of the Jordan River were firmly in the Ottoman camp. Closer they were to the east of the Jordan River, or farther they were probably their leaders were bribed or something by the Ottomans. Or they feared just getting killed. Later in the year, the Hashemite warriors made a series of small raids on Ottoman positions in support of British General Allenby's winter attack on the Gaza-Beersheba defensive line, which led to the Battle of Beersheba, which was a huge battle. Typical of such raids was one led by Lawrence in September of 1917. that saw Lawrence destroy a Turkish rail convoy by blowing up the bridge it was crossing at Mudwara and then ambushing the Turkish repair party. Lawrence was like fucking Solid Snake in 1917. This man got the convoy routes and decided, like, hey, you know, they have to cross this one bridge. Let's blow it the fuck up. And then we can raid them because they'll be discombobulated. So that's what they did. Oh, crazy. Lawrence was crazy good at fighting and crazy good at war. In November of 1917, as aid to Allenby's offensive, Lawrence launched a deep raiding party into the Yarmouk River Valley, which failed to destroy the railway bridge at Tel Shahab, but which succeeded in ambushing and destroying the train of General Mehmed Semel Pasha, the commander of the Ottoman 7th Corps. Allenby's victories led directly to the British capture of Jerusalem just before Christmas of 1917. Which we're going to get into. But essentially, because of all these victories, because of like Lawrence getting all the support, causing all of these revolts happening, they were able to move towards Jerusalem. Now let's go ahead and get into the capture. So Lawrence, before we get to Jerusalem, let's go to Dera. And just like a quick kind of view into what the war was like for Lawrence and his account of an event that went on in Dera. On the 20th of November of 1917, after celebrating his victories in Aqaba, Lawrence was traveling in disguise and did end up getting captured by the Ottoman military, where he was beaten and potentially sexually assaulted by the local bey or governor and his guardsmen. They all took turns with him because he was soft and supple. The accounts in the two versions vary, but not significantly, so I'm going to read you the 1935 version from his book titled Pillars of Wisdom. And again, his voice is going to be the old-timey radio announcer. My plan was to walk around the railway station and town with Faris and reach Nasib after sunset. Faris was my best companion for the trip because was an insignificant peasant, old enough to be my father and respectable. I was in Hallam's wet things, with a torn Hurani jacket, and was yet limping from the broken foot acquired when we blew up Jamal's train. It was really fond of blowing up that shit back then, as everyone knows. And, the limp made me look a little more supple, a little more feminine-like. Someone called out in Turkish. We walked on deftly, but a sergeant came after and took me roughly by the arm, saying, "The Bey wants you." Not sure what he quite wanted, but, you know, I was like, well, sure, fine enough. They took away my belt and my knife and made me wash myself carefully. And I was a little confused while I was washing myself as they kept on staring. Typically, in these situations, when we have prisoners captured and they wish to bathe themselves, we don't stare at them with quite the same vigor that they seem to be staring at me. Specifically towards my rear end. I was a little concerned there. Tomorrow, perhaps, leave would be permitted if I fulfilled the Bey's pleasure this evening. Not quite sure what the pleasure was supposed to be, but, you know, it was, I was assuming that he just wanted a conversation, or maybe to try and get some information out of me. The Bey seemed to be in Nahid, and was also the governor. Well, they took me upstairs to the Bey's room after I was done washing, or to his bedroom, rather, because there was a bed on there. I was a little confused. Typically, these meetings are done in offices. He was another bulky man, Circassian himself, perhaps, and sat on the bed in a nightgown, trembling and sweating as though with fever. I wasn't sure what was troubling him, so I asked him, "What ails you?" But I was pushed down. I was pushed in. He kept his head down and waved the guard out. In the breathless voice, he told me to sit down on the floor in front of him. And after that was dumb. While I gazed at the top of his head, on which the bristling hair stood up, no longer than the dark stubble on his cheeks and chin, at last he looked me over, seemed to be really eyeing me up and down. He told me to stand up and then to turn around. I obeyed. He flung himself back on the bed and dragged me down with his arms, and then began trying to open up my butthole. He grabbed both my cheeks and spread them apart. And then he tried to do this thing with his tongue where he went, and I was a little freaked out. When I saw what he wanted, I twisted around and up again, glad to find myself equal to him, at any rate in wrestling. As everyone knows, I was a student of someone named Andre in Russia with wrestling, and so I was very skilled at it, very talented. He began to fawn on me, saying how white and fresh I was, and how supple my ass looked, and how fine my hands were, how soft they were, and my feet, and how he'd let me off drills and duties, make me his orderly, even pay me wages if I would just love him. He kept begging, and I was like, what? No. What? No. I don't want that. I have shit to do. I need to go blow up some more shit. I was obdurate. So he changed his tone, and sharply ordered me to take off my drawers. And when I hesitated, because again, you don't just typically take off your drawers like that when someone's commanding you to and they've been fawning all over you unless you want to get your asshole eaten, apparently, like he was trying to do. He decided to snatch at me. I pushed him back. He clapped his hands for the sentry, who hurried in and pinned me down. He also was commenting on how supple my ass felt against him. I could feel his dick get harder and harder, and the Bey, or the governor, cursed me with horrible threats, and made the man holding me tear my clothes away, bit by bit, slowly. His eyes rounded at the half-healed places where the bullets had flicked through my skin a little while ago. Finally, he lumbered to his feet, with the glitter in his eye, and began to paw me over. Just kind of rubbing me up and down at first. He seemed rather excited. I guess there isn't a lot of white people there, and he just kept commenting about how white and fresh I looked. I still wasn't sure what was about to happen. I bore it for a little bit until he got a little too beastly and then jerked my knee into him. I jerked him pretty hard there, and he staggered into his bed, squeezing himself together and groaning with pain, while the soldiers shouted for the corporal and the other 3 men to grip me hand and foot. As soon as I was helpless, the governor regained courage, and spat at me, swearing he would make me ask for pardon. Not until he was done with me, though. He was going to have his way, and he took off his slipper, and that's right, his slipper, and he hit me repeatedly with it in the face, while the corporal braced my head back by the hair to receive its blows. I was a little confused. I thought it was going to hurt more, but it's really soft and silky. He seemed to really want to put on a show for me and try to make himself look best. He leaned forward, fixed his teeth in my neck, and bit until blood came out. And then he kissed me. Again, really confusing. I wasn't sure what he wanted. If he wanted to kill me, right now I kind of get the point. He was trying to get my sweet, supple asshole that Daddy Lawrence gave me. Afterwards, he drew one of the men's bayonets, and I thought he was going to kill me, and was sorry. But he only pulled up a fold of the flesh over my ribs, and worked the point through after considerable trouble, and gave the blade a half turn. This hurt, and I winced while the blood wavered down my side and dripped to the front of my thigh. He looked pleased and dabbled it over my stomach with his fingertips. And then he told me to put lotion on. He kept saying they put the lotion on its skin or it gets the hose again. And I wasn't sure what the fuck he was talking about there. What the hell was lotion? What the hell was a hose? Why did I have to put it on my skin? He had a small tiny dog that kept barking. And then he showed me a well. And in my despair, I spoke. His face changed and he stood still, then controlled his voice with an effort to say significantly, "You must understand that I know, and it will be easier if you do as I wish." This made me so dumbfounded, and we stared silently at one another, while the men who felt an inner meaning beyond their experience shifted uncomfortably. Seems like this was a rather common occurrence for the governor. It was evidently a chance shot, by which he himself did not, or would not, mean what I feared. I could not again trust my twitching mouth, which faltered always in emergencies. So at last, threw up my chin, which was a sign for no in the east. Then he sat down and half whispered to the corporal to take me out and teach me everything. And by teach me, apparently he meant to beat the fuck out of me. They kicked me to the head of the stairs and stretched me over the guard bench, pummeling me. Two knelt on my ankles, bearing down on the back of my knees, while 2 more twisted my wrists until they cracked, and then crushed them and my neck against the wood. They kept just pounding me in there, but they weren't they didn't have their dicks out, so I wasn't getting rammed. The corporal had run downstairs and now came back with a whip of the Circassian sort, a thong of supple black hide, rounded and tampering from the thickness of a thumb at the grip, which was wrapped in silver. Again, it was very dramatic, and it seemed like this was like specifically for whatever the fuck was happening here, and it was down to a hard point finer than a pencil. He saw me shivering, partly I think with cold, and made it whistle over my ear, taunting me that before his 10th cut I would howl for mercy, and at the 20th beg for the caress of the bay. And then he began to lash me madly across with all his might, while I locked my teeth to endure this thing, which lapped itself like flaming wire about my body. It burnt, I tell you, burnt the fuck out of me. To keep my mind in control, I numbered the blows, but after 20 I lost count, and could only feel the shapeless weight of pain, not tearing claws, for which I had prepared, but a gradual cracking apart of my whole being by some too great force, whose waves rolled up my spine till they were pent within my brain, to clash terribly together. And at some point during the middle, I will admit, I did think it might have been easier just to get my ass eaten out by the bay, but it was principle, and I did not give in. Somewhere in the place, the cheap clock ticked loudly, and it distressed me that their beating was not in its time. It annoyed the fuck out of me that they weren't whipping me, in rhythm with the fucking clock. It was annoying. The cadence was off. I could have dealt with it, and I probably would have enjoyed it a little bit more if they would have just done it in a rhythm at least. But I writhed and twisted, but was held so tightly that my struggles were useless. After the corporal ceased, the men took up very deliberately, giving me so many, and then an interval during which they would squabble for the next turn, ease themselves, and play unspeakably with me. They really wanted, they were very adamant about who gets to beat who, because apparently I was just so fun to whip and get the shit kicked out of me that they just loved doing it. This was repeated often, for what may have been no more than 10 minutes. Always, for the first of a new series, my head would be pulled around to see how a hard white ridge, like a railway, darkening slowly into crimson, leaped over my skin at the instance of each stroke, with a bead of blood where two ridges crossed. As the punishment proceeded, the whip fell more and more upon existing wheels, biting blacker or more wet till my flesh quivered with accumulated pain. And I really began to question why I didn't just let the bay eat my ass out. It would not have been that bad. Besides, he's just eating my ass. That's all he was doing. But with the terror of the next blow coming, always being in the back of my mind, they soon conquered my determination to not cry. But while my will ruled my lips, I used only Arabic, and before the end of merciful sickness choked my utterance. I remembered the corporal kicking with his nailed boots to get me up, and this was true for the next day. My right side was dark and lacerated, and a damaged rib made each breath stab me sharply. It felt like I was constantly getting jabbed again by that whip in my side. Every time I breathed, I think I began to just when I got whipped, I would breathe in rhythm with it. So every time I breathed, I'd kind of think about the pain. Really fucked me up. I remember smiling idly at him, for a delicious warmth, probably sexual, was swelling through me. And then that he flung up his arm and hacked with the full length of his whip into my groin. This got me really fucking excited. Got me so horny. This doubled me half over, actually, screaming, or rather trying impotently to scream, only shuddering through my open mouth. One giggled with amusement. A voice cried, "Shame you've killed him." Another slash followed, a roaring, and my eyes went black, while within me the core of life seemed to heave slowly up through the rending nerves, which expelled from its body by the last indescribable pang. And again, very sexual. I think I discovered something about my kinks that day. Then Nahi called. They splashed water on my face, wiped off some of the filth, and lifted me between them, retching and sobbing for mercy, to where he lay, but he now rejected me in haste, as a thing too torn and bloody for his bed. Again, apparently, after you get done beating someone, they're kind of gross to look at. So blaming the excess of zeal, which had spoilt me, whereas no doubt they had laid into me as much as usual for other people, and the fault rested mainly upon my indoor skin, which gave way more than an Arab's. It's way more apparent about how beaten I was than it would be for regular Arabs. Because again, I was super white, man. Still pale and pasty. Good old England. With the sun doesn't shine and it rains 24 hours a day. So the crestfallen corporal, as the youngest and best looking of the guard, had to stay behind. I'm not sure what he did to him. I don't think he wanted information from him. Again, this whole time I really thought that the Bey just wanted me because, like, he realized that I was English, but turns out, no, he just, again, liked my ass. That poor corporal, though. I am certain some horrible things were done to him. That ends the tale. Again, I added a lot of embellishment in there, but that actually probably happened. Most of it. Maybe not him describing about wanting his ass eaten during the whipping, but the assault happened. However, the son of the governor resident in Dara at the time has been quoted as saying that the narrative has to be false because Lawrence described the Bey's hair, while in fact his father was bald. However, if you want to go back, you can, but Lawrence describes in the 1922 text as the Bey's head as being shaven with stubble standing up, which a lot of bald people do have stubble still. They're bald, but they have stubble. There is also uncertainty about the identity of the Bey, which, if you have seen, again, bald men, they have their hair going up. And, I could just totally see Lawrence thinking that fat baldy McRapes-a-ton just had a shaven head. Also, with an event that tragic, I'm sure that many details would be a little off or not perfectly described. But again, he was actually pretty on point with everything he described. So I really think the Bey's son just doesn't want to think of his dad as the gross fucktard rapist that he was. Because again, he was fucking gross. Now, because Lawrence was getting his salad tossed by the governor and was captured, he was unable to be a part of the battle for Jerusalem. So let's, I just want you guys to picture as we're, in Jerusalem, Lawrence of Arabia is just getting his ass eaten out right now. He's getting his salad tossed. That's all that's happening. He's not, and he's liking it. Later in life, he does grow to like it more. So, this is where he discovers his love for it. So just picture that while we're doing this. Jerusalem operations began with the Battle of Nebi Samuel, fought between the 17th and 24th of November. They were continued by the subsidiary Battle of Jaffa between the 21st and 22nd of December, and ended with the defense of Jerusalem from the 26th to the 30th of December. These battles were ultimately successfully fought by the 20th and 21st and the Desert Mounted Corps against the Ottoman 7th Army in the Judean hills and their 8th Army. Battle lines extended from the north of Jaffa on the Mediterranean Sea across the Judean hills to Bire and east of the Mount of Olives. The battlefield over which the Battle of Nebi Samuel was fought continued to be subject to attacks and counterattacks until early December, when Jerusalem was occupied by the British. Fighting also continued in the vicinity of the Bire, a main Ottoman supply line, running along the Jerusalem to Nablus Road north of the city. One tactic that was claimed to have been used and was instrumental in the defeat of the Ottomans here was a ruse that Richard Meinertzagen claimed to have either ordered or done, where they were routinely dropping supplies that would quote unquote miss British and Allied troops that were usually filled with cigarettes. And this was done kind of in a, so you know how you train animals, right? Where you give them a reward and you use like Pavlov's theory of like conditions or whatever. So they essentially psychologically, again, according to Richard, they psychologically conditioned the Ottomans to think that the supplies were, important for the British and not, and it wasn't just like them, dropping supplies to them to like fuck with them biologically or like use like some sort of different type of warfare. And And so they kept doing this to the Ottomans, supposedly. And right before the main attack on the city, the supply drop, this time with cigarettes laced with a fuck ton of opium. It was basically just opium with a hint of tobacco. And the Ottomans, thinking that, again, they just got another free airdrop from the British, they decided to toke it up and get really, really relaxed, man. They were like, man, I feel like so fucking good right now. They're like, oh shit. And these British guys are all right. Like, what? How are we even fine right now, man? It's just crazy. I want to go take a nap. And just for reference, for those of you who don't know, when opium is smoked, the drug causes a short-term high that includes relaxation, pain relief, reduced anxiety, and impaired alertness and coordination. The effects usually wear off in about 3 to 4 hours, typically. This supposedly caused the Ottomans to surrender the city without much of a fight, which I wish was true. I'll explain in a minute why it isn't, but this is how we should fight every war. I'm just saying, just get everyone really, really fucking high, and I can assure you, most people would be like, nah, man, this is like everyone's area. The world's like our mother, and it like takes care of us, man. Boom, world peace right there. I'm a fucking genius. Okay, with that said, I would like to issue a challenge to all of my listeners to hotbox the earth. Instead of nukes, let's just get a fuck ton of weed and gas our enemies with that. I'm talking about like gassing the fuck out of them. It won't kill anyone as long as it's used safely. And it would lead to like the funniest peace treaties ever being signed. Just think about it, guys. Let's start that chant. You know, hotbox the earth. That's our goal. It's like reverse global warming, or actually, really, it is just global warming, but with weed fumes. Anyways, now the reason why the story is pretty much considered fake by everyone who knows shit about history, is because the man who wrote about it in his diary, Richard Meinertzhagen, who was considered a war hero by many before the 70s, but recent historians discovered he had a bit of a history with fraud, racism, and potentially murder or murders that he may have committed. And many people have commented poorly on his characters. Such people as T.E. Lawrence. So T.E. Lawrence, who is sometimes a colleague in 1919 and again in 1921, described Richard more ambiguously and with due attention to his violence. He was quoted as saying, Meinertzhagen knew no half measures. He was a logical, an idealist of the deepest, and so possessed by his convictions that he was willing to harness evil to the chariot of good. He was a strategist, a geographer, and a silent, laughing, masterful man, who took as blithe a pleasure in deceiving his enemy, or his friend, by some unscrupulous jest, as in spattering the brains of a cornered mob of Germans, one by one, with his African knob carry. His instincts were abetted by an immensely powerful body and a savage brain. He definitely did not have tight as an asshole as I did. I can quote you on that, right? Just remove that out of my quote. That was T.E. Lawrence in the Seven Pillars of Wisdom in 1926. Meinertzhagen himself traced the evil side of his personality to a period during his childhood when he was subjected to severe physical abuse at the hands of a sadistic schoolmaster when he was at Fonthill boarding school in Sussex. This is his quote as to why he was an asshole. Even now, I feel the pain of that moment, when something seemed to leave me, something good, and something evil entered my soul. Was it God who forsook me, and the devil took his place? But whatever left me has never returned. Neither have I been able to entirely cast out the evil which entered me at that moment. The undeserved beatings and sadistic treatment which were my lot in childhood so upset my mind that much of my present character can be traced back to Fonthill. That is where I learned of my enjoyment for beating the fuck out of Germans, specifically. And I really, really don't like anybody who's not white. And it's all because my teacher beat me. That's why. I'm not an asshole. Gavin Maxwell wrote about how his parents would scare him and other children to behave themselves when Meinertzhagen visited with, remember, he has killed people with his bare hands. So, and he probably did kill people with his bare hands. Salim Ali noted Meinertzhagen's special hatred for Mahatma Gandhi and his refusal to believe that Indians could govern themselves. Oh, goddamn. He was on the wrong side of history there. Anyways. In the Meinertzhagen mystery, Garfield presents a fuller perspective of Meinertzhagen as not only a fraud, but also a murderer. The book argues many of Meinertzhagen's accomplishments were myths, including the famous Haversack incident, which Garfield claims Meinertzhagen neither came up with nor carried out. It was actually thought that he may have stolen that from another commanding officer who came up with it, but then died, and so he took the credit for himself for coming up with it. In another example, Garfield researched Meinertzhagen's diary records, noting 3 meetings on separate dates with Adolf Hitler. Yeah, this guy claims that he met with Adolf. Although Meinertzhagen was in Berlin on these dates in 1934, 35, and 39, Garfield found no record of any of these alleged meetings in surviving German chancellery records, British embassy files, British intelligence reports, or newspapers of the day at all. So, those claims were probably all made up, and he just wrote down in his diary, again, to, stir up some bullshit and to potentially sell his diary as a book. Garfield's research leads him to speculate that Richard also killed his second wife, Annie, who was born Anne Constance Jackson, who was the daughter of Major Randall Jackson of Swardale, who married Meinertzhagen in 1921. She was an ornithologist, and her death was not an accident as claimed and ruled in court. She died in 1928 at the age of 40 in a remote Scottish village in an incident that was officially ruled a shooting accident. The finding was that she accidentally shot herself in the head with a revolver. Because, very normal back then, during target practice alone with Richard. But Garfield argues Meinertzhagen shot her out of fear that she would expose him and his fraudulent activities, because she knew that he was full of bullshit. And she was they were having arguments at the time. Honestly, I am thinking about doing either like a show that's adjacent to this one that's still Historical Quarrels, but we do like history, like murder mysteries. Like I can go into the theory of who Jack the Ripper was. I could go over like historical murders. So anything that's like happened in the past 100 years and before that, essentially, is what I would consider to be like a historical murder, essentially. We could call it historical murders. If you like that idea, let me know. Just tell me through an email. And if you have any, ones that you think would be interesting or fun to do. Again, because I love history, so it'd be just kind of fascinating. And then like the way people were back then, it's interesting because there's a lot of similarities, but there's some like big differences too. Anyways, continuing on about why Richard sucks. Stores L. Olson has pointed out some errors in Garfield's research while confirming the validity of its overall negative tone. Essentially, there are some errors with Garfield with the research that he conducted, but overall, Meinertzhagen was an asshole. And he's been referred to as a serial psychopath in relation to his acts in Kenya. And his acts in Kenya were insane. And again, since this isn't a true crime podcast, I won't be going into too much detail of what he may or may not have done. Again, unless you all want me to do a story on him and calls murders quarrels, which, I guess they kind of are, but it's a bit fucked to think of domestic abuse and, the straight up, like, brutal beatings of children in Kenya as a quarrel. But, whatever y'all want. I'll do it, I guess. I don't mind. Hollywood, it's how they do it there. I love Time Suck. I know I can come across as like copying him sometimes. I just, some of it's too good. Too good. Anyways, after the Ottoman army had evacuated Jerusalem, the city was occupied on the 9th of December of 1917. This was a major political event for the British government. One of the few real successes the British could point to after a year of bitter disappointments on the Western Front. Again, that first episode, I needed that first episode to set up about how fucked Europe was during the beginning of the war. They were getting their asses handed to them. So everything that happens in the East really, sets them up for more wins later on. On the Ottoman side, this defeat marked the exit of Jamal Pasha, who returned to Istanbul. Jamal had delegated the actual command of his army to German officers, such as von Krestenstein and von Flackenhahn, who more than a year earlier, but now defeated as Enver Pasha had been at the Battle of Sarıkamış. He gave up even nominal command and returned to the capital because the Germans just knew what to do with the troops. I don't know why I just kept going up higher and higher there, but it just felt like the right thing to do. Less than a year remained before he was forced out of the government. Falkenhayn was also replaced in March of 1918. So by the end of 1917, all the objectives of the campaign to capture Jerusalem had been achieved. Ottoman-German operations against Baghdad had been frustrated. The last reserves of Ottoman soldiers were engaged, and the British nation's morale had been boosted by quite a bit. The Prime Minister of the United Kingdom, David Lloyd George, wished to knock the Ottoman Empire off the war in 1918, just completely. He was like, all right, we guys were kicking ass. Let's just knock them out and get it done. Already the 7th Meerut Division from Mesopotamia was ordered to Palestine, and there were many who were worried that if significant forces were diverted from the Western Front to Palestine, England might protect her colonies but lose the war. The Westerners argued that the real heart of the Ottoman Empire, Istanbul, still lay hundreds of miles from an advance to Damascus or even Aleppo. And if the Ottoman Empire saw at the same time Germany overrunning France, it would not be enough to force the Ottoman Empire from the war. With Russia out of the war, the Dardanelles were no longer an objective for the British Empire, as access to the Russian fleet was no longer of any importance at all. Because again, the Tsars were getting fucked over and people were dying over in Russia. It didn't matter. The Easterners accepted that it was essential to maintain the forces in France and Belgium on the Western Front, but that they were already sufficient to keep the front intact. They argued that to surrender the initiative everywhere and to concentrate on a policy of purely passive defense along the whole battle line was a counsel of despair. Germany would have a brief window of opportunity, thanks to the armistice between Russia and Germany, to attack the Allied forces on the Western Front before the United States, which had already entered the war at this point, could bring significant numbers to end Germany's war. The US was on their fucking way. They were going to back up and essentially relieve the troops, the French and the British troops, which have already kicked Germany's ass quite a bit. I mean, they were losing, but France was kicking some German ass back in 1917, all right? They're doing well. It might be interesting to see France versus Germany with this war, too, because of all the shit that went on there. Anyways, but the Easterners asserted that during 2 years of war, the Allies had superiority in numbers and material greater than the numbers of the Germans. Material greater than the numbers the Germans could bring from the Russian front. And they had failed to break the German lines. They argued that the Palestine theater might be wasteful of shipping, but the Western Front was wasteful of lives. It would be folly to take seasoned troops from Palestine, where decisive victory could be won, to die in the stalemate. Which is, it's reasonable to think that way. Because again, if they're already seasoned, they know what the fuck they're doing. The people who have lived through this definitely know what they're doing and know how to survive and know how to win battles. So it'd be kind of silly to take them into a brand new theater where they don't know the area, they don't know the terrain, and they're essentially, being rushed out to the front lines again and having to try and figure out everything from ground zero. Very reasonable thought process here going on. So on the 13th of December, 1917, the War Cabinet instructed General Staff to consider two policies: the conquest of Palestine, or an advance to Aleppo to cut the Ottoman communications with Mesopotamia. So on the 14th of December, Allenby reported that the rainy season would prevent any further attacks for at least 2 months. Qualified approval from the Supreme War Council for decisive offensive to annihilate Ottoman armies and crush resistance was contained in the Joint Note number 12. It was claimed that the destruction of the Ottoman Empire would have far-reaching results upon the general military situation. So, early in February of 1918, General Christian Smuts, General Jan Christian Smuts. It's like Christian, but with like 2 A's at the end. And then the last name is actually Smuts. Who was a member of the Imperial War Cabinet, was sent to confer with Allenby regarding the implementation of the Joint Note. The French imposed an important qualification on the Joint Note that no British troops in France could be deployed to the Egyptian Expeditionary Force. Smuts informed Allenby the intention was to reinforce the Egyptian Expeditionary Force with one and possibly 2nd Indian Cavalry Division from France, 3 divisions from Mesopotamia, and more artillery and airplanes. Excuse me. Smuts also suggested crossing the Jordan, capturing the Hejaz Railway, and using it to outflank Damascus. Okay. And so, with all that in mind, they decided to do that, and that's where they would go take out Hejaz and capture the railway completely. And the war would go on to be a complete success. They would capture Jericho, Jacob. They would occupy the Jordan Valley, and they were able to eventually decisively take out Damascus and knock the Ottomans out of the war. But all of this was due to all of the little strategic moves that were done, in Gallipoli, where they were able to learn, about how the Germans were operating, learn the movements. They were also able to learn from Lawrence and his Arab revolt. They mapped the area. The reason why the British would end up winning this war was because they put more of an effort into, I guess, really learning their area better than the Ottomans did in most of the time, besides the Gallipoli campaign. So after the dust settled, the gun silenced, and Lawrence of Arabia's mouth washed and the Bey's mouth was washed, and the treaties were signed, the landscapes of the British Empire and the Ottoman Empire were forever changed. And Lawrence of Arabia's asshole was also forever changed. The Ottoman Empire, which was once a vast and influential power that spanned 3 continents, would end up being partitioned by the Treaty of Sèvres in 1920. Its territories were divided among the victorious allies. A new nation arose from its ashes, which it would become the Republic of Turkey, under the leadership of Mustafa Kemal Atatürk. And the heart of the former empire now beat with a nationalist rhythm, sparking a wave of modernization and secularization that would drastically change the face of Turkey and, keep fucking over Armenians quite a bit. Meanwhile, the British Empire, though on the winning side, was also deeply affected. The cost of the Great War was a heavy burden on the empire's economy and its population. It marked the beginning of the end of British imperial dominance, setting the stage for the gradual decolonization that would happen throughout the 20th century. And these changes didn't just reshape these 2 entities, it completely changed the world. The carving up of the Ottoman Empire led to the creation of several new nations in the Middle East, the borders of which were drawn with a somewhat arbitrary hand. The legacy of these decisions still echo today, as many of the conflicts in this region can trace their roots back to these divisions. Specifically, between Faisal and the areas that they wanted for the Arabs, the independent Arab state that didn't ever fully get, it got realized, but it wasn't what they wanted. So the creation of the modern state of Israel and the ongoing conflict between the Israelis and the Palestinians, which also caused a bunch of turbulence in Iraq, Syria, and Lebanon, all have ties to the collapse of the Ottoman Empire and decisions made in its aftermath. Basically, all the wars that we're fighting now is because of World War I and the shit that got done there and fucking over the Ottoman Empire. The war's impact on the British Empire was equally profound. The immense cost of the war in the terms of lives, resources, and finances, coupled with the rise of nationalist movements in its colonies, eventually led to the dissolution of the British Empire. This process resulted in a whole host of newly independent nations. Just a bunch of new baby nations were born because of it. And the political, social, and economic consequences of this are still unfolding in the present day. So even till today, a bunch of this shit is still kind of going down. So next time that you guys look at a map, just remember that those lines and borders aren't just geographic markers. They're echoes of history, a testament to the profound changes set in motion during and after World War I. From the streets of Istanbul to the bustling city of London, from the deserts of the Middle East to the farthest corners of former British colonies, these echoes continue to shape our world today. Which is going to take us out of our quarrel and lead us into the last part of this episode. All right, guys, so that brings us to the end of the British versus the Ottomans in World War I. What did you guys think? Did you guys enjoy the episode? As far as my takeaways, I kind of went over it there towards the end with my last little bit that I had written out. Just like how important these wars and how important it is to understand why these conflicts take place, why future conflicts would take place. World War I was really the progenitor of a bunch of issues that we now face today in our modern world, which is really cool to... Well, I guess it's cool and uncool because a bunch of old people just kind of fucked us over nowadays. But it's cool to think about because if we're able to understand why these conflicts take place, we're also able to understand, why decisions were made back then and how we could potentially resolve current ongoing issues and it gives us a better insight into people that we have conflicts with as well. Because, we more than likely teamed up with people in the past that we're fighting with now. And that's just, it's due to someone getting fucked over. Happens quite a bit. A lot of these quarrels, a lot of these wars caused by people just getting fucked over, feeling like something was unjust. World War II is a direct result of Germany feeling like they got completely fucked over and they needed someone to point the finger at and blame. But, what did you guys think? What was your favorite bit? Sorry for the excruciating detail that Lawrence. So I did read, I took a segment of the book, The 7 Pillars of Wisdom, and I of course wrote in my own bits about it. So not all of that was true, but most of it, you can look up most of what I said and find out that that's exactly what went on. Maybe not the whole, he was trying to eat my asshole, but I just thought it was kind of fun. It also helped lighten up the assault he was going through because I just need something to laugh at. And I this show isn't really meant to be dark and gritty. It's more of meant to be fun and just kind of take these aspects that are typically taboo or hard to talk about and make it easier to talk about. And I do that through joking. I mean, if you don't like that, I get it. The show's probably not going to be for you then, but that's fine. If you did like it, I'm glad. If there's something I could have done better, please let me know. If there's any way to improve. I'm actually reformatting the way I write my episodes. So for the next one, it's going to not be a war again, but the one after that will be a war. However, the way I'm doing it is I'm going to take essentially a figure from the event, right? I'm going to go through their life and then have the historical events kind of go around them, or what happens to them, or somebody central to the conflict. So let's say I were to do an episode on the actually, no, I'll use a different example, or the Hatfields and the McCoys, right? So let's say I did an episode on Hatfields and McCoys. I would take specifically one of the McCoys or Hatfields, maybe 1 to 2 of them, and I would go through a timeline where their lives happen, and then the key moments that cause the conflict go on, and not do it through their perspective, but do it in respective to where they're at in their place in time. And maybe I'm going to try and look up and find more stuff to how they responded or how they felt about it. just to make it a little more interesting. Because I'm realizing some of my episodes that I feel like I've personally done better, I did more of that. Like the Alexander the Great episode, it was definitely told from Alexander's perspective for the most part. I just kind of I did like a third person follow of Alexander. I read the fake speeches that he gave afterwards, where he heavily hinted that he and Bucephalus may have had more than just a warrior, horse, animal companion relationship. Because his father was trying to breed centaurs. Come on. He's just got to keep up. But so I'm going to do something a little more like that. The next episode right now is going to be on the Astor riots. So we'll be following the two actors, kind of going over their lives, what leads them into acting, and then just kind of have the quarrel again take place around them. Because I feel like that's how a lot of this happens. There's usually like a central figure or two, and these wars or quarrels get caused around them. Unfortunately, for something huge like World War I, it is more of like a nation or a national response to another nation's response. So that was a little harder to do. I could have definitely taken like Lawrence's life and just done an episode on Lawrence, right? But I wasn't sure if this episode was the episode to do that. I might redo, not necessarily redo this, but I might just do like a in-depth look at Richard or like Lawrence in a future episodes. Because again, I'm trying to figure this out. Like I want to make the show more interesting, and I feel like this is a good way to make it more interesting, right? I don't know. If you like that idea, I guess just tell me. You can send me an email at historicalquarrels@gmail.com, or you follow my Instagram or the Facebook page that we have set up, and just talk with me. Let me know what you think. Different ideas too, different quarrels, because I do kind of miss doing like the Isaac Newton and the Robert Hooke episode was fun, or just something kind of like that. Again, wars are fun and all, but I do kind of want more of like central figures to follow. So like if I were to do Carthage again, I'd just follow Hannibal. And talking about Hannibal as a kid, I'd talk about how his father was essentially like a mercenary for Carthage. And that's how I could give you that key piece of information. Because like right now, like, or at least before when I was originally writing these episodes, I thought the way I view history and its importance, I feel like every bit of detail that I give is important. And the reason why it's important is because it leads into another event. However, I do realize now that it doesn't make for as interesting storytelling. And so if I want more people to listen to this, I want more people to get this, better insight of history, I have to be a better storyteller. So I'm going to write my episodes to reflect that and to be a better story that's easier to follow and listen to. So I'm not going to do like a timeline, if you guys watch or listen to Time Suck, I'm not going to do like a Time Suck timeline, but I am going to go through a person's life, right? So it's going to be like a life story, or one or two life stories that happen at the same time with each other. So during this year, it's essentially a timeline. I'm just calling it a life story because I'm already dealing with a lot of like imposter syndrome, where I feel like I'm copying too much. Like the voice that I'm doing here, I mean, that's a radio announcer voice, right, from 1920s. So that doesn't feel like I'm copying too much. I like that voice. I can do that voice. So that's why I did it in this episode. Also German. The Germans are so easy to mock, y'all. So I mean, like that one. Also didn't cause me too many imposter syndrome issues. But I've been dealing with that a lot. I think that's been kind of like, it was hitting me pretty hard these past couple episodes for sure. Definitely impacting the way I was like writing. I had a harder time essentially coming up with jokes without feeling like I was stealing, and so I would constantly change jokes or rewrite things because I was like, no, I can't do this because this was already done. And though I know that like imposter syndrome's real, nothing is really real, everything's derivative, I still want to be original. I'm still trying to find my own voice with this. But so I do think you guys will appreciate the story better It'll be, again, overall, the show will be better by the changes that I'm making. So in the next couple episodes, if you hate it, let me know. Let me know. I'll go back to how I'm doing this, where I kind of go in like in a battle, or go battle by battle, or different things, and I'll do that. I'll stick with this if that's what you guys want. That's what you guys want. I'm not gonna try and change you. Because really, this is more of like, this part here, it definitely isn't for me. This isn't like I'm doing this because I want to. I'm doing this because I think that's it would be better overall for people listening. And because, like, the reason why I'm doing this is, one, I want my kids to be able to listen to this in the future, in case, something eventually happens to me, or like I'm out of their lives, they're able to listen to these episodes and have, their dad essentially tell them like a history story that I will want to try and talk to them about later when they're older. And then two, like I said in my interview, I actually don't know if that episode's up with the Passion podcast yet, but in my interview with Ashley, I kind of talked about how important history is and how important war is into understanding, life, understanding our modern world, and why things are the way they are. I think it's super important for people to learn and to study history. And I think if I can make this more engaging and more fun, I can fulfill that second part of my goal. And then I can just make that first part better by just improving my storytelling and how I'm writing these episodes. But again, though, let's say I do it. It all goes great. You guys love it. Awesome. But if not, tell me. I need to know, because I'm not going to, if I don't hear anything, I'll probably just assume that I was like, okay. And if I just see numbers spike, then I'll be like, oh, okay, well, I guess that's a yes. That's what people want. That's what they want to listen to. And so that's what I'll do. But yeah, I mean, wow, that was a lot of detail. A lot of extra shit you guys probably didn't need to hear. So yeah, next episode's going to be on the Astor riots that were caused by this English and American theater actor. So like, like actual theater. They weren't like in movies or anything. Where the military would end up getting involved trying to quell down the riots because the American guy didn't get an award that they thought the Americans should get. There's some crazy shit that goes on. It's gonna be fun. It's interesting. I can't wait to show you guys and to show you how I'm writing this, because I really do think it's gonna be better. So that's all. Again, if you like this, share it with other people. Let me know by leaving me a review, emailing me, follow our social media. Talk to me. Just talk to me. I'm just a guy. That's all I am. I'm not anyone special. You don't have to feel like you can't talk to me or that it's weird. I don't mind. I talk to people for a living. I do sales, so trust me, talking to strangers, it's my normal everyday. I don't mind it. So don't feel weird. Don't feel weird. Don't feel like you're intruding on me at all. I'll respond when I can. But if I can't respond, or like let's just say I'm busy, then I'm just busy. But I probably will eventually respond. Unless it's like weird and you're requesting me to eat your ass like the Bay did in this episode to Lawrence, then I don't know. I might respond still and just be like, why? But everything else typically gets a pass, so you guys are good. But yeah, that's all. Share this with people that you think would like it. Share the knowledge. You guys have a good one. Bye-bye.